I spent over a decade learning about how money works and why most people are failing financially today. And in this video, I want to give you 21 financial tips that I personally plan to follow over the next decade or more in order to improve my finances and to make money more abundant. Let's get started. I wrote a thread on X where I mentioned all of these 21 financial tips. I'm going to go through the thread in this video and I'm going to give you some commentary on what I think you can do in order to improve your finances, in order to make better financial decisions, and to make it so that money isn't a struggle and you're able to deal with your finances in the way that the wealthy do. The very first tip that I have for you is to increase your income, decrease your expenses, and buy Bitcoin with the difference. This is basic personal finance. You want to earn more money so that you can increase your spending on the things that you want to, but then you also have money to spend on the things that are important for the future. So in this case, that would be Bitcoin. So let's say, for example, if you can increase your income by $500 a month and you can put that entire difference into Bitcoin, then you're going to do pretty well over the next few decades. If you don't increase your income, you're either going to have to cut down on your needs or your wants today, or you're going to have to sacrifice the future where you won't have Bitcoin in order to have a financially free life. The second tip here is if you spend more than you earn, you'll eventually go broke. This is kind of obvious. It's like calories in versus calories out for fitness. If you put more calories into your body than your body is actually consuming, then you're probably going to gain weight. But if you eat fewer calories than you're consuming, you're probably going to lose weight. Same thing with finances. If you put less money into your bank account than you're spending, then you're eventually going to go broke. Eventually, you're going to be in this position where you have either zero wealth or you're having to go into debt to pay for the things that you need on a day to day basis. And either way, I think you're not looking at a very positive future for yourself. And you don't have to just cut your spending. You can keep spending however you want to, but if you increase your income at a faster pace than you're spending, then at some point you're probably going to see that you're not broke and you have way more wealth than you had expected. And the next tip here is the younger you are when you understand how money works, the longer you can make money work for you. This is a concept of compounding. If you start learning about compounding younger, you can use time to your advantage. You can put small amounts into Bitcoin or any other investment when you're younger and get the same result as somebody who's older than you, putting in a lot more money. And I'm going to start with a very simple example here. If you start investing $100 per month for the next 30 years into Bitcoin and Bitcoin gives you a 25% return, you're going to have invested $36,000, but your portfolio would be worth $4.84 million. On the other hand, let's say you put $500 per month for instead of 30 years, you put it in for 20 years, you're going to end up with a lot less money, even though you put in 4 times as much. And the reason for this is that time works to your advantage when it comes to compounding. Most of your returns are going to come in the later years, and this is a perfect example of slowly then suddenly. So you can see here in the beginning, your portfolio is growing by a very small amount. In the first year, it grew by $7,500. You put in $500 per month. In the second year, it's growing by about $10,000. In the third year, it grows about $12,000. Fourth year, $15,000, and so on. If we keep going, we can see here that at some point, your portfolio is growing by $70,000 in a year. Then if we keep scrolling down, we can see here that from 2040 to 2041, your portfolio grew by more than $200,000 in 1 year because you have this base of assets that's working for you. It's working on your behalf rather than you having to put more money into your portfolio in order to make it grow. And you can see here from 2047 to 2048, your portfolio grew by over $1 million. So the longer you go, the longer you let your money remain untouched and you don't disrupt this feature of compounding for your portfolio, the bigger your portfolio will get. If you start selling your assets at some point, compounding is no longer working to your advantage for all of the money that you take out of your portfolio. I'm not saying that you never spend your money. I'm saying that if you keep your money in your portfolio longer, you're probably going to see better results than somebody who keeps their money in their portfolio for a very short period of time. The younger you are when you figure out how Bitcoin works, the more of it you can buy and the bigger your portfolio can be in the long term, meaning that you have to make fewer sacrifices in what you spend on at some point in the future. With Bitcoin, because it grows so fast, the people who are ignoring it are going to have a very difficult time buying the exact same amount of Bitcoin that they can today. So let's say if you have $1 million, you can buy something like 8 or 9 Bitcoin today. When Bitcoin goes to $1 million, that same $1 million will only buy one Bitcoin. When it goes to $10 million, that $1 million will only be able to buy 10 million Satoshis, or 0.1 Bitcoin. And the next tip here, tip number 4, is use compounding to your advantage. Without compounding working for you, you're just running on a treadmill and you're going to rely on your salary forever. A salary is a perfect example of linear growth. Linear growth is the opposite of compounding. If you keep relying on a salary your whole life, you're going to see that this is what your wealth is going to look like compared to somebody who's using compounding to your advantage. Let's say, for example, if you just earn a salary, you put your money into a bank account. Let's say you put $10,000 in that bank account each year and you don't have any growth. In 30 years, you're going to have $300,000. In the case of Bitcoin, if you keep putting $10,000 a year into it, you're going to see that at some point, the growth on your portfolio is bigger than the amount of money that you're putting into it. And that's where you see the red line, the compound interest line. Compound interest is growth on top of growth. You're basically building on top of what you've already built. On the other hand, with simple interest, you're not using what you've already built to build more. You're just building brick by brick rather than letting the bricks grow on their own and try to reproduce and create more bricks for you. And if we go back to the compound interest calculator, you can see here that the fiat balance of your Bitcoin is growing in a compounding fashion, meaning that it's growing faster and faster each year. This is what the chart for your fiat balance will look like. So we can see this chart here. The blue bars are your fiat balance. You can see here in the beginning, the blue bars don't even register. They look like nothing. But near the end, the blue bars are so big that the red, the annual expenses, which are growing much, much slower, are pretty much irrelevant. And you can see the annual expenses here. The annual expenses are growing, but at a much slower rate than your Bitcoin is growing, because your Bitcoin is growing in this case by 25% per year, while your cost of living is increasing by 5% per year. So that difference in 5% versus 25% is shown to you in this chart. The 5% growth looks very similar to linear growth, similar to this chart here. You can see here. So with compounding, your money works for you to increase your purchasing power rather than you having to work for your money, rather than you having to go to your job for the rest of your life in order to pay for your expenses. Your money is going to grow and it's going to give you more purchasing power so you can buy whatever you want to. The reason why we even work is because we want to make sure that we can pay for our expenses. If you understand how compounding works, you can use your money to make more money so that you don't have to work forever. And the next tip, tip number 5, consistency is the key to building wealth. Set up recurring buys for Bitcoin so you're buying whether it's at the bottom or the top. It doesn't matter how strong of an advocate you are for Bitcoin, how much you've studied Bitcoin. If you make one purchase, of course, at some point it's going to be worth a lot. But if you make multiple purchases and you keep buying and you keep buying, no matter what happens, you're going to have a lot more wealth. That consistency is key. It's the same thing as making YouTube videos. Let's say, for example, if I had made one YouTube video and I gave up after that and I just expected the algorithm to do its thing, I probably wouldn't be making YouTube videos anymore because I'd have to work a full-time job in order to make money. Consistency is so important because it's you showing up over and over again and doing the right thing that you're supposed to do in order to build wealth. You can see here, if you don't set up recurring buys, you probably will make emotional decisions to buy at the top, which is greed, and not buy at the bottom, which is fear. Even if you buy the top, you'll probably still do well with Bitcoin. But if you buy the bottom, you're going to get a lot more Bitcoin for the money that you put in, for your wealth, for the savings that you have. You're going to get a lot more Bitcoin, and you're going to see that the amount is going to continuously grow and grow and grow, regardless of what the market does, because you're adding more and more value into your stack, into your portfolio. You're not letting the market dictate when you retire. You're choosing when you retire. If you keep stacking Bitcoin, you're going to see that you're going to be able to retire a lot sooner than somebody who just buys a lump sum of Bitcoin today and waits. Of course, that depends on how much Bitcoin they get. Let's say if somebody can buy 10 Bitcoin today, they're going to probably do very well. And I'm not saying that, but let's say if you wanted to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin today versus $100 every single month for the rest of your life, you're going to see that it makes a massive difference. And I want to mention a comment somebody left in one of my videos. They said they have 0.04 Bitcoin and they don't plan to buy anymore. Is it enough? At some point, it will be, but you're going to have to wait a lot longer compared to somebody who's consistently buying over time. So we can see here in 2060 years, 0.04 Bitcoin or 4 million Satoshis will be worth $11.2 million. But if somebody were to buy, let's say $500 worth of Bitcoin per month, and they consistently just kept buying and kept buying, and they did whatever they could to increase their income and to put the difference into Bitcoin, you can see here that they're going to get to this retirement point much, much sooner. So instead of waiting until 2060 to have that $11 million figure, you can wait until 2052 to have a little bit more because you're going to have way more Bitcoin in your savings. Consistency is so important because it shows you what you're doing wrong. You can course correct along the way. You can set up recurring buys, meaning that you're going to buy the lows and the highs. You're not going to have to just rely on what you have in order to retire. You can keep increasing your income. You can keep buying more and more in order to increase the amount of Bitcoin you have so that you can retire much sooner compared to someone who just buys a lump sum and doesn't do anything else. I think the key here is to enjoy the journey, to figure out ways to create more value, to have a purpose in life so that you don't feel depressed just staring at your Bitcoin stack and not doing anything else. And the next tip here, number 6, is that your time horizon is the key to your investment thesis. If you have the wrong time horizon, the best assets in the world won't help you to build wealth. The wealthy think in decades, not days, so that compounding can work on their behalf. For example, if you buy Bitcoin, you have to wait for at least 4 years. If you study Bitcoin and you buy it with your rent money, you're probably going to end up disappointed. You're going to end up being one of those people who lose money with Bitcoin because you had the wrong time horizon. Instead of waiting for Bitcoin to double in the next month, stop thinking about getting rich quick because it's not going to happen. Your goal here should be to buy Bitcoin and wait 4 or more years because in 4 years, you're pretty much guaranteed to see that the value of your Bitcoin has increased. I think this chart is really great at showing my point. You can see the dots that are colorful at the top, and then you can see a line at the bottom. Those dots are the daily price of Bitcoin. If you focus on the daily price, you're probably going to be very anxious about buying it. You're probably going to be very worried about having Bitcoin in your portfolio. But if you just look at the 4 year moving average, you can see here, this is the real price of Bitcoin. The real price of Bitcoin is constantly going up because there's a finite supply and there's constantly more people who want to buy some. I consider the daily price to be a distraction. The daily price is not relevant to your long term goals because the daily price doesn't determine the real value of Bitcoin. There are a lot of people who are buying Bitcoin at certain points who don't quite understand its value. They just want to get rich quick and they pump the price up. And then when the price falls, they sell as much as they can. That's why we see this massive volatility in the short term. Over the long term, Bitcoin's price is steadily growing. Use that to your advantage. Make sure that you have the right time horizon. Buy Bitcoin and wait 4 or more years before you even think of selling. If you can't hold on to your Bitcoin for 4 or more years, I wouldn't recommend buying at all. And the next tip here, tip number 7, is if you don't manage your money will manage you. You're going to be forced to work when you don't want to make money to pay for your basic needs. A few days ago, I mentioned the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can see here the physiological needs are what you need as your basic standard of living. If you don't have a basic standard of living, if you can't pay for shelter, if you can't pay for clothing, if you can't pay for food, then you're probably going to die and you're not going to have the best life, which is terrible. Most people go to their job just to pay for their physiological needs. And if they don't have their job, they're going to starve, they're going to be homeless, they're not going to be sleeping very well. They're going to be extremely stressed. They're not going to be able to meet any of their needs. So, your goal here should be to manage your money so that you can pay for your physiological needs and you don't have to constantly be under stress of when you're going to be able to get your next paycheck and whether or not you're going to be able to pay for your next meal. The next tip here, number 8, is you're not too poor to start buying Bitcoin. You can buy any amount over time. Small amounts will add up. If you buy small amounts, you're going to see that the value of those small amounts will add up and you're going to have a massive amount of wealth over the long term. And I want to show you another example using the compound interest calculator. If you buy $10 worth of Bitcoin every single month for the next few years, it may not seem like it's much in the short term, but over the long term, it will add up. It will increase in value. You can see here in the first few years, it doesn't seem like much. You go from zero to $150 to $300 to $500 to $800 and so on. It keeps increasing. It takes until 2038 to reach $10,000. But after that, because your stack is doing the work for you, you reach $20,000 in 3 more years. Then you reach $40,000 in another 3 years. And at some point, your $10 per month investment is going to be worth $1 million. And this is why I say put whatever you can into Bitcoin, because at some point it will be worth a lot more than what it's worth today. If you can afford $10 today, increase your income to be able to afford $20 at some point. Then increase your income to be able to afford $40, $50, $100 at some point. Find ways to earn value, because money in the current financial system is abundant. There is no limit to the number of dollars that can exist. If you have a poor mindset and you're already thinking that you can't save any amount of money, then you've already lost, because you're not thinking in terms of how the current financial system works. In the current financial system, money is abundant. There's no limit to how many dollars can exist. You have to go get those dollars. You have to go create value so that you can exchange that value for dollars, and then you can convert it into Bitcoin. And the next tip here, tip number 9, is that time is your only finite resource. Everything else is abundant. The rich don't exchange their time for money because everything else can be printed, including the money that we have today, but your time can't. Your time is finite. The rich create an army of employees, which is their assets. Let's say they buy rental properties, they buy index funds, they buy whatever they can to work for them to generate more dollars. In your case, I want you to work to build an army of Bitcoin so that that Bitcoin is going to grow over time and it's going to generate more and more dollars for you. One very important thing here to understand is that currencies are the most abundant thing on earth. They're the only thing that take no time, effort, and energy to create more of. Don't use your entire life chasing currencies, chase value instead. And the next tip here, tip number 10, taking bigger risks doesn't always lead to bigger rewards. Taking no risks will likely lead to regrets later in life. I think that the pain of regret is a lot more painful to deal with than the pain of failure. I'm okay with failing. I'm okay with being bad at something as long as I know that I tried. Your goal shouldn't be to say no to all of the things that are difficult in your life. Your goal should be to learn as much as you can, to create as much value as you can in any way possible, because that way you know that at some point you're not going to regret the decisions that you made. A lot of people like to take bigger risks in terms of finances, and they like to buy assets that are going to outperform Bitcoin so that at some point they can trade out of those assets and buy Bitcoin. But the bigger risk that they're taking could end up with them having zero or way less Bitcoin than they would have if they had just bought Bitcoin instead. Instead of buying meme coins, buy Bitcoin. Instead of buying the random shit coin that somebody's promoting, like Ethereum, XRP, Cardano, whatever the coins are, buy Bitcoin, because you know that Bitcoin is going to have slow and steady growth over time. And that slow and steady growth is going to lead to true wealth. In that time that you build that Bitcoin stack, you're going to learn a lot more about money, and you're going to become much better at managing your finances because you let your stack grow slowly and steadily. But don't get me wrong, it is important to take risks. Let's say, for example, if you want to start a business, I highly recommend that you do it, because if you don't, then you don't know whether or not you would have succeeded. But don't take the kinds of risks that lead to your death. Don't take the kinds of risks that lead to you going to jail. Don't take the risks that lead to you going into bankruptcy, because it's very, very difficult to recover from the last two. And if you die, you're never going to recover. Risk management is key here. If you manage your risks, you're probably going to get bigger rewards than somebody who takes no risks whatsoever. And tip number 11, without a budget, you might be spending your money recklessly without realizing it. If you don't track your expenses, then you have no idea what you're spending your money on. For example, before I started looking at my finances and started tracking my expenses, I didn't realize I was spending $300 to $500 a month on takeout alone. After I started tracking my expenses, I started cutting down on takeout, and I had more money to spend on the things that I really needed in my life, and to pay down debts and to invest. I have a couple of examples here of different kinds of budgets. What most people do is they earn a certain amount of money. Of course, you may not be earning $10,000 a month, and that's perfectly fine. We can change this number to even to $5,000 a month. If you earn $10,000 a month, after tax, you're getting about $7,000. If the majority of your money goes to your needs and your wants, you have nothing left to save. A lot of Bitcoiners go the opposite way. They spend on their needs and they don't spend on their wants. They don't spend on enjoying their lives, and they put all of their money into their savings. The 50-30-20 budget is more balanced. You put a certain amount of money towards your needs, a certain amount of money towards your wants, and then you save the rest. So, for example, here you can see Your needs are 50% of your budget, your wants are 30% of your budget, and your savings are 20% of your budget, so that no matter what, you're putting some of your income into your savings so that at some point you can rely on your savings if you need to. Using spreadsheets for this will make your life a lot easier. I highly recommend that you learn how to use spreadsheets so that you can track your expenses and you can make better financial decisions. And tip number 12, this one's kind of obvious. I'm not going to go too deep into this. Build multiple sources of income so that getting fired from one doesn't lead to bankruptcy. You can create different kinds of products to earn income from. You can create digital products. You can start creating social media content. You can do your 9 to 5. You can do a part-time job, whatever you want to do. Find ways to earn money in multiple ways rather than just relying on your employer, because if your employer fires you, then you're not going to be able to meet your physiological needs, and think about the stress that's going to cause in your life. The next tip, tip number 13, banks are not trying to help you. They make money when you make mistakes. Again, banks make money when you're not financially literate. You have to find out how they make money, and you don't do those things. Try to avoid high interest debt. Try to avoid carrying a balance on your credit card. Try to avoid not having enough money in your account so that you don't get charged a not sufficient funds fee. When I was younger, I was terrible at managing my finances. I was spending $90 to $180 every single month on NSF fees because I just didn't care. I didn't pay attention. When you start paying attention, you start noticing that your bank is designed to make money from you if you're not financially literate. It will continue to take your value forever if you don't learn how to manage your finances. And the next tip here, number 14, a lot of people think that their house is an investment, but it's really not. It's a liability. Your house is going to take money out of your pocket rather than putting money into your pocket. Don't spend as much as you can on a house, because your house is just a place for you to live. It's a lifestyle decision. If you sell your house at some point, let's say in retirement, you're going to have to find another house to live in. The costs that are associated with owning a house are massive. Owning a house usually isn't even worth it if you run the numbers, unless you want stability, unless you want to have a house for your family, you want to stay in the same area for a very long time. If you don't plan to live in your house for 10 or more years, I don't think it's worth it, because otherwise, most of the money that you put into that house isn't even going towards your equity. It's going to the interest that you're paying on your loan to buy that house in the first place. This is an example of a mortgage amortization calculator. If you were to borrow $500,000 for 30 years at a 6% interest rate, you can see here that in the first year, you're paying $35,000, but $30,000 went to the bank in interest. In the next year, it's almost exactly the same thing. In the next year, it's almost exactly the same thing. In the first 10 years, you would have paid about $360,000 to your bank, but the majority of the money would have gone to interest. You can see here, the initial value of your loan is $500,000. After 10 years, you still owe $418,000, even though you've paid $360,000 towards your mortgage. Over time, you can see the payments are flipping. In the beginning, most of your money goes towards interest. In the end, most of your money goes towards your principal. But interest isn't the only cost. You have to pay for maintenance and repairs. You have to pay for a realtor. You have to pay for lawyers. All of this stuff will add up, and you're going to be paying a lot more towards your house than you think. Tip number 15 is that personal finance is never black and white. Personal finance is personal. Something that works for you may not work for somebody else. I heard this really great analogy where if you try to take personal finance tips from somebody and you try to follow their exact strategy, it's almost like somebody giving you the numbers to a lottery ticket where they won a few years ago, and you're probably not going to be able to repeat that. So something that works for you may not work for somebody else. Something that works for somebody else may not work for you. Make your decisions based on your current financial situation. If you're not able to meet your short-term physiological needs, then that should be your focus. Your focus should be to earn enough money so you can pay for your physiological needs, so you can pay for food, so your family doesn't have to starve and isn't living outside. But after a certain point, after you've met your physiological needs, your short term needs that are required for survival, you can start thinking about the future. Tip number 16 is that not all debt is bad. This is something that a lot of very poor people, a lot of people who don't really have their finances in order think. They think that debt is all terrible. You should never take on debt. But the wealthy use debt to their advantage. They use debt to buy assets. They use low interest debt to buy assets. The poor use high interest debt to buy depreciating goods. Bad debt is going to hurt you financially. That's the high interest debt to pay for depreciating goods. And good debt is going to benefit you financially. So if you use debt, if you go to your bank and you borrow money that's created out of thin air, and then they charge you 3 to 5% to borrow that, and you use that to buy assets, you're going to see that those assets are going to increase in value. Like I mentioned before with Bitcoin, they're going to increase in value and you're going to have more value in the future. You have to understand that if you borrow money at some point, you're going to have to reduce consumption in the future to pay it back. If you use high interest debt and you carry a credit card balance to pay for depreciating goods, if you pay for your physiological needs using credit card debt, then you're probably going to end up not doing very well financially. On the other hand, if you cut your expenses and you try to increase your income and then you pay for the things that you need, and at some point you have a good enough financial standing that you can borrow money to buy assets, I think you're going to do very, very well. And maybe this won't apply to you. If anything, at some point, you'll be able to sell a portion of your assets that you bought using the low interest debt. And in general, you would have benefited from making that decision to buy those assets with the low interest debt. So if your debt is increasing at 3 to 5% per year and you buy an asset that's giving you 25%, you're probably going to do very well over the long term as long as you hold on to the asset and you are able to deal with the volatility that comes with owning that asset. So, again, not all debt is bad. The current financial system relies on debt. If you don't play by the current financial system's rules, you're probably going to suffer at some point in the future. And the next one here, an emergency fund turns an emergency into a minor inconvenience. Even for hardcore Bitcoiners, there is some benefit to saving 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in fiat. So, for example, let's say Bitcoin price falls 90%, you lose your job at the same time, and all you have is Bitcoin, you're going to end up selling your entire stack in order to pay for your expenses because you don't have a job and you don't have an income. You don't have any way to pay for the things that you need to pay for. On the other hand, even having a small amount of fiat, 3 to 6 months, worst case, will pay for the things that you need to pay for. And in the best case, if Bitcoin's price falls 90%, maybe you'll be able to increase your stack by using this 3 to 6 months worth of expenses to buy more Bitcoin. I think having some fiat in the current financial system is still important because your expenses are probably paid in fiat. And if you don't have a job, you're not going to be able to pay for your expenses. You're going to have a very difficult time getting by. Having a little bit of fiat as a backup reserve so you don't have to sell your Bitcoin in case you do lose your job is a great decision for the majority of people, I would say. And tip number 18 is that money is a tool. Simply having more shouldn't be your goal in life. Money in and of itself has no real value. You can't do anything with money. The only thing that you can do with money is maybe you can stare at a screen and you can see the amount of value that you have. Instead of just staring at your screen to see how much money you have, use it to design your life the way that you want to. I think that the best thing that money can buy is financial freedom, where you don't have to go to a job if you don't want to. You can live your life the way that you want on your own terms so that nobody else can dictate how you pay for your physiological needs. Most people in the world have to go to a job to pay for their physiological needs. They don't work because they want to, they work because they have to. They live to work rather than working to live. And the only reason for that is that inflation is killing their finances. Inflation is making it so that everything gets more and more expensive and they can't pay for the things that they need with just the job that they have. And over time, that spirals out of control. It gets worse and worse. You have to work 2 jobs, and you have to work 3 jobs, and you have to work 4 jobs. People are working more and more jobs because they can't pay for their physiological needs. So use your money to your advantage. Use it to design your life the way that you want to so that your entire life is not dedicated to working so that you can survive. The way that I see it, you should be trying to use your active income to buy assets so that those assets can pay for your lifestyle. If you use your active income to buy Bitcoin, at some point that Bitcoin is going to buy you everything that you want in your life. It's also going to give you financial freedom. And when you do have enough money, let's say to buy a Lamborghini, maybe you won't even want that Lamborghini. A lot of people are working today because they make these decisions that end up with them not having enough money to pay for their expenses and they have to work for the rest of their lives, even though they're making great incomes. So use your money as a tool, use it to design your life the way that you want to so that you're not living on anybody else's terms. And tip number 19, I think this is obvious to every Bitcoiner. Currencies lose value over time. They should be spent either on goods or assets as soon as possible. You should give away your cash as soon as you can because your cash is going to lose value over time. It's going to lose value 2, 3, 5% per year. And you're not even really going to notice it because everybody's going to gaslight you into thinking that it's not your money that's losing value, it's you that's not working hard. In the short term, cash is king because you know that it has some kind of stable value. You can use it to pay for your physiological needs. But over the long term, assets are king because cash is constantly losing value. Paper currencies are not money, they are debt that are backed by faith, they're backed by trust. They don't have real value. And tip number 20 is a sunk cost is an investment of time or money in the past. Whatever decisions you made in the past are gone. The past can't be changed. What you can change, though, is the future. Sunk cost should never stop you from pursuing something new. Let's say, for example, you go to school for something, you go for a year, and you end up thinking that you hate it. You're not just going to keep pursuing that degree, you're not going to keep pursuing that field because you know that you're going to be miserable doing it for the next 40, 50 years of your life. While you can't change the past, you do have some control over the future. So let's say if you go down a path that you realize you're not taking the right path, it's not the right one for you, you should change. You should make the decision to switch paths. Make the right decisions today so that your life is easier in the future. A lot of people make decisions and they think that they're going to just stick to them and they don't want to change their decisions because they've already made an investment into that decision in the past. As an example, I worked really, really hard to get my job in finance and I was working in asset management. In 2021, I quit my job, even though I had put so much time into climbing the corporate ladder and to get to the point where I was in order to do real estate and sales. I ended up hating that as well. And today I'm doing something completely different with social media because I gave up what I had in the past. I didn't let my sunk costs determine my future. And the last tip, number 21, opportunity cost is the profit lost when you take on one opportunity over the other. You have to consider this for everything. There's always going to be trade offs. There's no perfect solution. Every single solution will have pros and cons. For example, if you buy Bitcoin versus investing in stocks, in the short term with stocks, your portfolio is going to be a lot more stable, but with Bitcoin, it's going to be a lot more volatile. But over the long term, in the next 30 years, it could make a massive difference in your overall finances. More recently, I've started considering the opportunity cost of doing everything. It's not just financial, it's also about your time. Let's say you choose to do something and you don't do something else. Is that thing that you choose to do a better use of your time compared to doing something else? So let's say instead of making a YouTube video, I go to the gym. Is going to the gym worth it for me? Of course, both of them are going to be beneficial for me. So I would need to find a balance where I don't miss out on creating revenue and building the body that I want. I personally plan to follow these financial tips for the next few decades. The fundamentals will never change. Maybe I'll make some tweaks here and there. If you found value in this video, I would really appreciate it if you leave a thumbs up and you share it with the people you care about. I also have a link in the description if you want to book a one-on-one meeting with me, if you want to go in depth into any of these topics. The main takeaway here should be to increase your income, decrease your expenses, and buy Bitcoin with the difference so that at some point you are financially free and you're able to dictate how you live your life rather than your employer dictating how you live your life.